At dawn on June 5, 1967, the sky was still dark. No one knew that by sunset, the fate of the Middle East would be changed forever. Within hours, a small but prepared army would turn the skies of the Arab world into ruins. The war everyone feared had begun. But this wasn't just a military clash. It was a race against time, between air power, political decisions, and global pressure. In this episode, we take you through the six-day war, step by step, from the lightning-fast Operation Focus on day one to the fall of Sinai and Gaza, from the intense battles in the Golan Heights to the behind-the-scenes pressure from the US, the Soviet Union, and the United Nations. 6 days, 6 fronts, and decisions that still affect millions of lives to this day. This isn't just the story of a war, it's the story of a shift in the balance of power in a region that could ignite again at any moment. On the morning of June 5, 1967, before 7 a.m., the first wave of Israeli fighter jets took off from their bases. In complete radio silence and flying at extremely low altitude, over 180 aircraft headed toward Egyptian airspace. Their mission was clear: destroy the Egyptian Air Force before a single plane could take off. The operation was codenamed Focus, and it became one of the most successful preemptive airstrikes in modern military history. In just a few hours, over 90% of Egypt's aircraft were destroyed while still on the ground. Air bases were hit one after another, in Cairo, in the Sinai, and in Alexandria. Most Egyptian pilots never even made it to their cockpits. But Operation Focus didn't stop with Egypt. Israel's Air Force went on to strike airfields in Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, crippling them as well. By the end of day one, more than 400 Arab aircraft had been destroyed, while Israel had lost only 19. This overwhelming air superiority shaped the rest of the war. None of the Arab armies would gain control of the skies again. From that moment on, the skies over the Middle East belonged entirely to Israel. With Egypt's Air Force destroyed on the first day, the Israeli army had full freedom to launch a ground operation in the Sinai. Armored and mechanized divisions, with full air support, launched a three-pronged assault into eastern Sinai. From Rafah in El Arish in the north, from the central Negev region, and from Eilat in the south. On the second day, Israeli forces captured Rafah and El Arish and began pushing toward Qantara east. The main roads were nearly empty. Egyptian forces, disoriented and without centralized command or air cover, were unable to mount effective resistance. By the end of day 3, Egypt's defensive lines in northern Sinai had completely collapsed. Israeli troops approached the Suez Canal in several sectors, though they did not yet reach the canal itself. Meanwhile, in the south, Israeli units captured Sharm el-Sheikh near the Strait of Tiran, reopening the vital sea route to the port of Eilat. On the western front, Gaza, under Egyptian control, fell on the 4th day after intense fighting. The Gaza Strip, one of the most sensitive points in the conflict, now came under Israeli occupation. Over these 3 days, the Egyptian army suffered tens of thousands of casualties, killed, wounded, or captured, and Gamal Abdel Nasser, visibly shaken, appeared on national television to accept responsibility for the defeat, a moment without precedent in his leadership. If this turning point in history has been insightful so far, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. So by day 5 of the war, the southern and western fronts had largely collapsed. Egypt and Jordan were no longer in an offensive position, but in the north, Syria had still not entered the battle until the morning of June 8th. The Golan Heights, with their elevated geography, had long served as artillery platforms for Syrian shelling of northern Israeli towns. In the first days of the war, Syria hesitated, but after the fall of Gaza and Sinai, public pressure and political alliance with Egypt pushed Damascus to act. Syrian artillery in Quneitra and the Golan sporadically shelled Israeli areas. Israel, now holding total air superiority, decided it was time to neutralize the northern front. On the morning of June 9th, Israeli infantry and armored divisions, backed by heavy airstrikes, launched a multi-pronged assault on Syrian positions in the Golan Heights. The fighting was fierce and costly. The natural elevation in Syrian fortifications created stiff resistance. But by the evening of June 10th, most of the Syrian outposts in southern Golan had fallen. Syrian forces retreated in disarray, and the strategic city of Quneitra was abandoned without major resistance. With the fall of the Golan Heights, Israel had taken control of one of its most sensitive borders, a region that remains at the center of tension to this day. By midday on June 10, 1967, the roar of artillery had fallen silent across most fronts. In just 6 days, the political and military map of the Middle East had been dramatically redrawn. Israel now held control over the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. Territory nearly 4 times its original size. This lightning victory transformed the Israeli military into a dominant regional force, but it also marked the beginning of a new crisis: the occupation of lands and the mass displacement of people. That evening, under pressure from the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Nations, a ceasefire agreement was signed. Syria was the last to accept after Soviet mediation. In Tel Aviv, the streets filled with flags, and the Israeli government declared the outcome a military miracle. But in Cairo, Damascus, and Amman, the mood was one of defeat, anger, and shock. Thousands dead, tens of thousands wounded, and more than 300,000 Palestinians and Syrians displaced. Just part of the price of this 6-day war. The fighting had stopped, but the consequences had not. Borders drawn in 6 days would leave the region unstable for decades to come. With the battles on the ground over, attention shifted behind the scenes to the diplomats, the superpowers, and the international organizations now left to manage the fallout. On the surface, the ceasefire was in place, but this agreement wasn't the product of direct negotiation. It was driven by immense global pressure. In Washington, President Johnson's administration was surprised by Israel's success, but concerned about long-term repercussions across the Arab world. In Moscow, the Soviet Union, watching its Arab allies fall, swiftly condemned Israel and accused it of aggression. On the 5th day of the war, the Soviets warned Israel that if attacks on Syria continued, there would be serious consequences. Combined with intense U.S. diplomatic engagement, this created the momentum for ending the war. Around this time, the United Nations issued Resolution 234, calling for an immediate halt to hostilities and a return to pre-war positions. But the resolution made no mention of withdrawing from occupied territories or the fate of Palestinian refugees, leaving the seeds of future conflicts sown. 6 days of war, decades of tension, occupation, negotiations, and distrust. In the next episode, we explore the aftermath of the war, the refugee crisis, UN Resolution 242, the road to the Yom Kippur War, and even the roots of the Iranian Revolution. Thank you for staying with us. May our history be shaped by peace, not war. Until the next episode, farewell.